The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind. But we're going to have a show.
Everybody.
Hey, so we're on. There's no cue here. I am here, Tony and Kim, of course, joining me. Mark Thompson is away, even though the show remains titled as the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Michael Poor, and we have a good show for you again. We have a lot to talk about. There's news happening constantly. David Cay Johnston will be joining us to talk about that a little later. We should open with some breaking news because it is California-centric. It is environmentally a conversation, and it has a lot to do with Santa Ana winds whipping up in Southern California. There is a Franklin fire in Malibu right now that is causing terrible havoc.
Ooh, look at that.
It's burned nearly 2,000 acres in California, or maybe even over that at this point. And
2,500, they're saying now.
It's damaged homes. It's caused Pepperdine University to shelter in place. It has canceled, of course, classes at Pepperdine. And again, this is a fire that's being called the Franklin Fire. It's stirred up by these strong Santa Ana winds right now, and they start as brush fires and they spread. And parts of Malibu, for those who haven't been there, are in canyons, and those canyons are like tinder boxes because there hasn't been a ton of rain here in California recently, and this is what you get. So of course, firefighters on the scene, they've tried to access as much of that fire as they can with helicopter drops and the usual firefighting. But there on the map, you can see where it's centered in Malibu, and evacuations will happen. All the schools will be closed, and then life goes on here in California around that. But containing these fires is something that these firefighters are very good at, but they spread very quickly, especially with the winds, and that's what is a grave concern here in California.
Yeah, in addition to Pepperdine University, the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District has shut down all Malibu schools. I don't know why I can't say Malibu today, due to power outages and other fire concerns as well. So that's all going on. And Pacific Coast Highway is closed until further notice in certain areas. So this is a pretty big one. Yeah. This
is a biggie. We just got a $10 what do we call that? The super chat? Is that what we call that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and look at that. It says, I'm glad the show at least started late today. Yesterday you started and ended the show on time, and that's not how we do things. It takes a little while to learn how to do things right, and I apologize profusely for starting and ending.
No, we had a Google document technical error. So
we did. But there's always a reason to start late, and if that's how it's done here, I don't want to vary from what people expect here. But so again, apologies for being punctual yesterday. And
I think starting late is more to do with like, we're doing this instead. Stop.
Yeah.
And last minute changes.
Quick, presto changeo. Yeah.
So.
And so anyway, we will keep our eyes on that fire. It's a devastating thing, fire, and the way it spreads here in Southern California and in northern, in this state is terrible because of these winds. So we're obviously going to get to covering a little bit more about the United Healthcare, the Brian Thompson murder, the arrest that was made in that case. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump. We're going to be talking about Syria. Let's kick off with what I think is an immensely inspiring and great story. I don't know very much about Taylor Swift. I don't know her music very well. I know people who have kids who love it, and then their parents say, actually it's pretty good. There's been nothing to disabuse me from loving Taylor Swift and what I do know about her, and it just keeps getting better. It was learned that Taylor Swift, whose tour ended yesterday in Vancouver, last night in Vancouver, it's a tour that made more than $2 billion, that she said was a 2-year tour, and that over those 2 years, Swift gave out $197 million in bonuses to everyone working on her tour. It's not the dancers, it's not the promoters, this is truck drivers, caterers, instrument techs, roadies, the merch people, the lighting, the sound, security, the choreographers, the pyro people, the riggers, the hair, the makeup, the wardrobe, physical therapists, and the video people.
And that's how you do it, right?
And that's how you do it, right? That's how you do it. And it's interesting. You can force a comparison to any story in news, I've figured out, is that when you see something, you can always say, and that's what makes this story so interesting. So when you look at what has been in the news this week, and you look at what happened with the murder over the 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half ago now, of Brian Thompson, United Healthcare, the reason that there is sympathy for the killer in that case, it's a curious thing that we don't see very often, is because of the greed that you're seeing from huge corporations like United Healthcare. And then you look at Taylor Swift, who is making money hand over fist, doesn't have to do this, or could have done it at a far smaller level than she did, yet she gave away nearly $200 million after making $2 billion on her tour. Now, of course, all that money doesn't go to her, but what you can do when you have, for the people who don't have as much as you do, is exemplified here by Taylor Swift, and it's exactly what makes people so angry at big corporate America, and especially places that deny 33% of claims like United Healthcare. So it's not an exact analog, but man, there is a lot that is similar between what is right about Swift and wrong about United Healthcare.
Well, and she shows that it's possible to be a good person, to take care of your people, to share the wealth. She shows that you can be, I'm hearing an echo, Tony, for some reason. She shows that you can be someone who collects the money and then spreads it around a little bit, shares the love a little bit,
Yeah. No, there's no question. And look, it's not, what makes my analogy faulty a little bit is that she's only Taylor Swift, and these big companies are beholden to boards of directors, in many cases to shareholders. In many cases, the employee list is far too big, right? But the truth of the matter is that this is about what is right and what is doable, and how Taylor Swift doesn't have to do what she did, and most bands I don't think do. I'm sure they treat their people very well, most of them, but that's what we're looking at, and I think that, and even like not knowing her music as I don't, and not knowing very much about her other than where there's NFL crossover because I'm a sports fan, I have to say that there is something that is truly amazing about that, and I hope that is the way to inspire people to be better to the people around them. And maybe that's a comeuppance for the big corporations as well.
And it's not like she saved it all to the end, which would have been nice anyway, but
Right.
she was giving out bonuses and paying people the whole way through this show.
Yeah.
I have become something of a Swiftie because I have a teenage daughter.
Right.
And so I drove my daughter and my niece to the Eras tour in San Jose when it came here. And so I kind of got swept up in it all and listening to the music with them. And there are some people that think, oh, all the music sounds the same. It's all about, heartbreak and loss. I find the more I listen to her, the more talented I think she is. I think she's amazing in so many ways.
Yeah, I think you're not alone, and I know a lot of people who came to it through their kids. I just haven't, but I don't reject it. I don't know that I could name very much of what she has done. I know that there songs. If you said the name, I'd say, oh yeah, that's a Taylor Swift song. But
take it off. Yeah,
exactly right. There you go. And so I just think that it's great to hear that, at a time when we're drowning in greed, and we have politicians talking about protecting the greediest and the corporations, and we have Supreme Court saying the corporations are people. When people are bigger than corporations like Taylor Swift is, and they do the right thing, I think it's worth mentioning over and over and telling everyone about it, because it's pretty important. So while it's a light story, it's also I think an inspiring story as well. I think there's nothing in learning journalism, either in education or on the job, that allows you to make a smooth transition from Taylor Swift giving $200 million away to Matt Gaetz getting a job on One America News. But that is what we are reporting. It's been reported Matt Gaetz, the recently resigned member of Congress, who resigned just before ethical charges against him were levied by the Ethics Committee in the House. He also was named to be the Attorney General by the incoming president. He withdrew from that because there was such a groundswell against him. He knew that wasn't something he could do. And what does he do? He goes to One America News, a place that, my God, if you don't know what it is, don't learn what it is. And he's going to be an anchor at One America News. I'm sure. What's that?
You called this. You said this would happen.
Well, I called it in the abstract. Yeah, I mean, I said he'll probably get a job at One America News or Right Side Broadcasting Network. and to give you a little look at what these entities are, if you don't know them, One America News is based in San Diego. It is a completely conservative broadcasting service, whose lead anchor on the show, and his name escapes me, but is now Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend.
God.
I'm not going to name him because I'm not sure what it is. The other one is Right Side Broadcasting Network, which is a streaming service that is only tells stories from the right point of view. And at several Trump rallies that I was reporting from, many of us who were in sort of regular media or unopinionated media, you'd have to be sending your pictures up by getting a link. So you use something called a live view, and that live viewer, so there's also something called the Dodera, which is the same thing, which is like your own personal satellite, and you can transmit a live report with it, and it goes up if you have internet. And they would cut the internet off at these Trump rallies, except the people that One America News and Right Side Broadcasting Network would be able to transmit perfectly. They had a different login or a different, whatever it is, network that they could log into, and so they were an arm of the Trump campaign for a very long time. And when I would speak to people in line at Trump rallies, and I'd ask them where they get their news, most of them, almost all of them, would say OAN and RSN are places.
That's not real news. These are the people I've watched White House press conferences where there's some really important issues of the day, pressing breaking news stories to talk about. These are the people that stand up and they ask tired, old, same abortion questions over and over again. Anything that has to do with the religious right, Christian nationalist stuff. If that's where you get your news, if that's where all of those people get their news, no wonder they're still sucked into it all.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's also very clever by the Trump people, right? This is how you cultivate your herd, and this is what they did. And I think that it's not illegal, and it wasn't known about enough, but they found a way to change the way people get information by labeling the others as fake news and then creating their own news and directing people only to that news, which, when you hear people talk about fascism, right? And many people said, Vice President Harris said the same thing, that Donald Trump is a fascist. Doesn't mean that he's a Nazi. It doesn't mean that he has a plan to destroy another people. you can have that conversation on your own. But these elements of fascism, parts of the fascism is creating your own media and discounting everything that one media, the established media, has said. And those are journalists and people who have editors and people who work very hard, not exclusively, but pretty much, and don't get paid a lot. Most reporters don't, and so. But he creates them as being elite, and he creates them as being liars and fake news, and he did it successfully. You got to tip your MAGA hat to him, because he did it in such a way that he was elected president 2 out of 3 times he ran, and he has enough people behind him in that movement that he won the popular vote and was able to get information out the way he wanted to. And so it's a scary thing. And now Matt Gaetz, in a way, makes it more of a parody, right? Because there are a lot of people in the Republican world who think Matt Gaetz is a clown as well. So in a sense, he does not, in my estimation, bolster the what I think is propaganda. He actually makes it seem more like propaganda than it is actual news.
Here's the thing about Matt Gaetz. I feel like in order to get your message across to people, whether you're spouting lies or whether your whole life is about getting the truth to people, regardless, you have to be able to connect with people. And that means in some way, someone somewhere has to find you likable. And what we know about Matt Gaetz was that and this is one of the reasons that his nomination for Attorney General went south. Nobody likes this guy. Not the people that know him, not the people that had to work with him. How he managed to get a nomination just by maybe licking Trump's boots is amazing, because nobody likes him. So is he going to sit in this OAN anchor chair and is he going to try to pull the same thing? Because he won't connect with people.
Trump rewards loyalty. And Matt Gaetz was super loyal to him. And I think that, will he connect with people? He'll connect to the people that watch that. First of all, he's a nice looking guy. He speaks the language of the ultra conservatives, and to a lot of people, he is actually a hero for deposing Kevin McCarthy. So a lot of people look at him as the person who did that, and so he was an instrument in making MAGA rise again in a way, because of how difficult he made those elections for the House Speaker. So there's so many elements that went into why Trump won, right? I mean, it's not just this. It's not just that they created right-wing media. It's not just that he was able to campaign a lot more for a longer time than Vice President Harris, who had a short trip to the nomination. It has a lot to do also with fostering a change of standing up to establishment members of his own party, and that's what Matt Gaetz did. But again, it was more from the gut than it was from the heart or the brain, and I think that's I think it's not going to work well, but it doesn't matter, right? I mean, he's going to find people. He's a celebrity in those circles, and those people love celebrity. I mean, they elected one to the presidency, so it's probably going to resonate well in that crowd, but I don't think it's going to change the course of history.
You're going to laugh at me, because after everything you just said, the thing I'm still stuck on is, you think he's a good looking guy? Because I don't think he's a good looking guy.
He's not like, he's, you don't have to, I mean, when I say nice looking, I don't know. He's fine looking. He's not
kind of satanic about his eyebrows. I don't know.
Well, there is, but in the sense of, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. He's not one of the worst looking people on Capitol Hill, let's put it that way. And he also, like, in hand to hand, he's friendly. People, but so are most of the 435 people up there, 535, because that's what they do, that's their stock and trade. But even as he endured and didn't have to be friendly, which is what happens to the ones that turn. He was a pretty friendly guy, but he's I think we've probably given him enough time. I feel like let's get off to another subject, which is Luigi. Luigi Mangione. So this is the story, as we expected, is getting even more and more interesting. There's Luigi Mangione. They call this the booking photo. It's no longer a mugshot, but that's pretty much of a mugshot. They put him in that prison outfit. When he was arrested, he had a scarf on, and he looked as dashing as he did when he was charming the hostel worker and HOSTEL worker in New York. But the reports of his arrest were that he went, was in a McDonald's. He was on his laptop, and someone from the McDonald's crew there called the police. The police came very quickly. They sat down and talked to him, and they asked him if he had been in New York. Tony, do we have this clip of the New York police or the Pennsylvania police talking about this? I don't know if we do.
He'll pop in a second. Yeah, it's interesting how he didn't get rid of the physical evidence, allegedly, that he still had the gun and he had the writings about United Health. If I was listening to something earlier, an attorney was saying if he had managed to divest himself of all of this physical evidence, his lawyer would be able to make a better case. Like, oh yeah, you got the wrong guy. No, it just happens to look like him. But he's got all the stuff. Like, why did you not get rid of all of it?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. I mean, it seemed like it was this perfectly executed crime, and it really wasn't. I mean, he that's what made him seem most like the scion of a wealthy Baltimore family, is that he didn't really know what he was doing here. It seemed like he did. Like, people were talking about how he's a hitman and it was a perfect execution and he left. That we're going to find out that it wasn't. And we're going to find out that, that while he appears and has the biography of someone who you wouldn't expect to do this, something in Luigi Mangione broke over the past year. About 6 months ago, he stopped talking to family. He stopped talking to friends. He wasn't responding to emails and direct messages and texts. And so something broke. And that's going to be, these last 6 months are going to be the most telling part of what brought him to where he was. We can speculate, and there has been speculation. He lived in Hawaii for a time. He was part of a book club in Hawaii, and the book that he suggested people reading, and these are early reports, was Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. He was the Unabomber, and apparently Mangione did a review of that on Goodreads, the website Goodreads, at some point, and people, it sort of ended the book club because people were kind of weirded out by the fact that was what Luigi decided would be a good book to read. In the Goodreads,
in his review of it, he said stuff like, we can't condone what Kaczynski did and he deserves to be in jail. But you also, this from Mangione, he said you also can't, look away from why the Unabomber did what he did, why Kaczynski was moved and motivated, and his writings. You can't look away from that. Like, there's some truth in that. So it seems to me like that's kind of where he turned. But I was also reading an account from a friend, which kind of detailed his spinal injuries since he was a child. He'd had back trouble. And then he had the surfing incident when he was in Hawaii, and he tweaked his back, and he ended up having to go through surgery and had a bunch of pins in his back. And so he was suffering from medical issues. But what's interesting is he's from a wealthy family. He had a master's degree in engineering. This is not someone without, right? This is someone who has access to money, access to probably really good medical care. These aren't poor people or middle-class people that struggle to pay the bills. These aren't people that, this could break them. This probably wasn't going to break him. Yeah. So why he was moved to become the face of this, struggle against corporate greed is interesting.
Yeah, no, and not only that, I mean, you look at, just because he went to an Ivy League school, Ted Kaczynski graduated from Harvard. He had a PhD, I think, from either Michigan or Wisconsin. I think it was Michigan.
He went to University of Pennsylvania, I think.
No, I'm talking about Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, Kaczynski, my apologies. Yeah.
So these people, I mean, if you have a mental break of any kind, it doesn't look at your college resume, right? I mean, these are things that happen, and whether you feel wronged by corporate America or by the medical or insurance world, that's going to register, and that's what happened here with Mangione. So you understand why. Look, I think the most telling part, like I said, is the fact that he broke away from his family and friends. And he was somebody who was very close to his family and friends. He was also the valedictorian of his high school, which I think implies a good deal of popularity. He was in a fraternity that's a decent amount of popularity to get into that fraternity at the University of Pennsylvania. He was active in sports. He was in a book club, and there are pictures of him in Hawaii with a big group of people that were hanging out together, living in the same place, having that book club. The people that have given reports of who he was as recently as early in 2024, that there's a real break between that description and what we're hearing now in the writings and obviously the actions of this kid. And it's going to be an interesting several months as we learn more about him, and as the prosecutors in New York and Pennsylvania to a lesser extent work on prosecuting this case, because he does have public support, right? There are people that like him. There's going to have to be a jury of 12 people that hears, yeah, you may agree with his sentiments, but you cannot agree with his method, right? And that's the jury selection in that case is going to be really fascinating.
Can we talk about public support? Because so many people are so upset that this McDonald's worker turned him in that now there's this movement to give this particular McDonald's horrible reviews. As a matter of fact, that there's so many 1-star Google reviews that now this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania has a 1-star review because so many people flocked to Google to make sure they ding it. Yeah, it's interesting.
There are a couple of parts of that conversation, which are who looks at reviews for McDonald's. I mean, who
exactly?
You're going to McDonald's, you know what McDonald's is, right? You're not going there because the review. Let's Yelp this place, right? No, that's not what people do with McDonald's. So I don't think it matters. The other thing is what we call a movement today versus what a movement is very different. If 984 people or 3,612 people write a negative review of a restaurant because of what's going on, I think we pervert that into saying it's a movement and, oh my God, there's this groundswell and public opinion and yada yada. I think it's interesting that we're seeing and hearing from people who are sympathetic to murder, because that's unusual and it brings up these conversations. But I don't think that there's. I think that we have to be careful in saying that that's what's sweeping the nation, is this feeling of sympathy for this kid. I think, though, that there is a massive amount of sympathy in that sort of distinguishes this event from others that have happened, no question. And people say that it's shining a light on a huge problem. I agree with that. It's really true. But it's still, like, I'm always dubious in this age of the comment section and this age of social media of what really means a movement. I mean, if there was no social media right now, there would still be people talking about, that guy had it coming. He was the head of United Healthcare, and they deny all this coverage. And we would talk about it as we talked about it earlier. I agree, times have changed, but I don't think that means that is reflective of the sentiment all across the board. Doesn't mean it's not either. It just doesn't prove it to me.
Well, let me tell you what that McDonald's manager said. Her name is Grace Winston. She says, I do my best to monitor our reviews because my bonus depends largely on customer satisfaction metrics. And it's looking, she said, like I'm screwed this year. Corporate is going to have my ass. She said, usually these reviews are about how bad the food was or how long someone spent in the restroom after eating here. She said, I can usually get people to delete them by offering up a few McFlurry coupons. But this is different, she said. The reviews today are all about how one of my employees turned their back on the working class and that they should be ashamed of themselves for getting an American hero arrested. This is according to the McDonald's manager. She said, I actually agree with most of the people leaving reviews. My husband had a claim denied last year, and we are paying over $60,000 out of pocket because of corporate greed. So the employee who did this is on bathroom duty for the remainder of the time they work here. Please come and ruin our toilets to teach them a lesson. That's allegedly what the McDonald's manager said. I don't know because I didn't interview the person myself, but that's pretty strong.
I mean, the employee, it's, first of all, there's going to be an asterisk, and he or she doesn't understand that corporate McDonald's is going to look at these bad reviews and see them with a little bit of context. And so I don't think her bonus is going to be, in jeopardy here. And I don't know if that person's been demoted to bathroom duty. And that seems to make me dubious of all of it. So
it should make you dubious, because I think of it was kind of it's a punk website, but it's interesting how that's kind of a certain sentiment of some people, and how I don't know how we can be desensitized to murder, a brazen murder where someone's shot on the street, and have corporate greed be more important than human life, the taking of a human life.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think we are. That's why I'm saying, like, en masse, I don't think we are. I do think that people are, smart people and people who feel this, the hurt of the insurance industry and how we have how we have medical care in this country. I think that they are that they're having conversations they wouldn't ordinarily have during a murder.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think, Tony, do we have some video? I think Mark sent us some video of talking about that Goodreads review. And I thought it was it's kind of interesting to look at it in kind of a more analytical way. Go ahead.
Since it broke last week. And I know you've been looking into some of his digital footprint as part of the evidence that police have collected, including some writings on a website called Goodreads, book reviews, where he reportedly reviewed the Ted Kaczynski Unabomber manifesto. What did that say?
Well, that's exactly right. So there's a whole host of things that investigators right now that they have time, right? So the focus the last 5-6 days has been on who is this person? Can we get them? Well, that's now solved, and this individual's been charged. So they have the advantage to go back and say, okay, now that we know who it is, what's their online footprint? And exactly to your point, they've got all sorts of information that he has posted online before, or it is sometimes even more helpful. What are their accounts? What are the things that they're reading? And what are they opining on? And in this particular instance, he's talking about the Unabomber and his thoughts on the Unabomber. So that's one of the things that they're looking into as they try to make sure, is this in fact his account? And then what does this mean? Does it help us with motive, or does it help us understand? And could we be looking at other people in the future that want to do what he wants to do? And one of those things that they've been looking at also is a photo of a spine that has screws in it. And so is that his spine? Was that somebody else's spine? Is that another type of thing that could have helped fuel this? So I think when we look at this, it's going to take a while to sort through all of that. That work we know is ongoing, and we're reporting that. So we're just going to have to see, I think, in the coming couple of days where this all goes. One of the downsides of him being in the New York court system is that they typically don't put a lot of that information in their charging documents. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Normally, if this was in the federal system, even in Pennsylvania, we might get a lot more information as far as what they were uncovering as it pertains to motive, should they want to introduce that in the charges in New York State. Unfortunately, just the way that the law has nothing to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. It's going to be a challenge.
And Clint, the New York Times actually has some additional reporting on this spinal X-ray that's been circulating online, or at least related potentially to that. And here's what they report out. Mangione was in regular contact with friends and family until about 6 months ago, when he suddenly and inexplicably stopped communicating with them. He had been suffering from a painful back injury, friends said, and then went dark. A friend told the New York Times that his spine was kind of misaligned, and quote, he said his lower vertebrae were almost like a half inch off, and I think it pinched a nerve, end quote. How significant is this?
I think it's quite significant for two reasons. One, it may point to motive and why United Health, why this direction. Even if you look at the other evidence that might be out there in the open source, nothing really points to healthcare. So that's one dimension of it that might be looked at. The other is the dimension that Catherine was talking about, which is what was his mental health status? If he's in persistent pain, would that contribute to this or maybe put him in a different psychological state?
And I also
I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it. His grandfather, by the way, is very, very wealthy. And talking about, someone who had every opportunity in life, he's the heir to this fortune where the grandfather owns a resort hotel, a radio station, some other businesses as well. His sister went to Vanderbilt Medical School, and she's a resident at the University of Texas Medical Center. So he's got, he comes from a very prominent family.
Yeah, and again, I think this is all about the break. This is and the other part of this is back pain. They were just talking about it, right? There's nothing wrong with being wealthy, and there's nothing wrong with growing up well if that's what happened. It sounds like his grandfather was Sicilian and worked his way up from the bottom and created his own fortune, which is always admirable. But then there's if he's got this excruciating back pain. I fortunately never have had that. People say pain like that is, and that's allegedly that we just saw there an X-ray that was taken with pins in his back. He had misaligned vertebrae, and when that pain can make you delusional. It can make you think differently than you ordinarily would or were raised to think and behave. So it could go to that. The judge yesterday at his arraignment asked him if he had any mental illness or drug use, and Mangione replied no, not that are significant or not that apply here, or not that are worth mentioning. I'm not sure exactly what the verbatim on that was, but the point is that he is somebody who could have just cracked because of this pain, and it created an irrationality, and who do you go after? You go after the healthcare industry, and you're already somebody who is a little bit upset with corporate America, and that it's like the perfect stew. I'm sure that is what they are going to argue in their defense, is that he was somebody who did this because of that, because of the pain just made him irrational. And but it also could be that irrationale is what made him do the final act, but he was perfectly within his own capacities and just damn angry at the way healthcare is perpetrated in this country, which is fine and believable and understandable and not at all delusional. But I do think that when you take it to the level of murdering someone, it's gone to a place that something else carried it there.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, and it's something we'll be following as it goes along. And I think though that we talked about collectively corporate greed and being, especially with the whole Trump campaign and billionaires taking over and America now having a new class of oligarchs. But This case seems to be, I don't know if it's opened kind of a wound and has let everything really come out. And I don't know if it's going to be something that is the catalyst for the middle class really rising up and calling foul on what's happening.
Yeah, it's starting a conversation, and it's a conversation that wouldn't have started without it because it didn't, right? I don't think many of us knew that 33% of claims made at United Healthcare were denied. I certainly didn't know it, and I read the news a lot.
I didn't know they were using AI to deny claims. I didn't know that either. And so in that sense, it did start a conversation. I think, I'm an optimistic person, so I think it's a conversation that's going to be impactful. And I think it's going to be part of the next conversation we have about Medicare for all, or some kind of socialized medicine in this country that
goes beyond what Obamacare did, which Obamacare is totally flawed, but it's a lot better than it is a big step in the right direction. And I will argue that with anyone who says no, it was a Band-Aid or whatnot. No, I mean, that's how progress happens, sometimes incrementally, and I think that was a big increment. And I think you got and now you have more people covered, so that they're not going to want that taken away. They're going to want more coverage. And so, yeah, and I totally think this started a conversation. I think we talked about it yesterday, Kim, is this whole idea of a horrible crime having a silver lining, and that silver lining may be that we talk about this and more people are educated about it. And when more people know and are educated, that's when change happens, historically.
I just want to put a little asterisk on what I read about the McDonald's manager. I don't think that's a real quote. I think that was made up. But I do want to say that Yelp has turned off comments for that restaurant because so many people are leaving negative reviews. So that part of that story is true.
Yeah, I go back to nobody reads reviews for McDonald's. Yeah. McDonald's is a default because it's inexpensive, although much more expensive than it's ever been. Or you're forced into eating there, or it's the only thing open, or you're craving something that is not good for you. I don't think you read a review of McDonald's. No. Hey, it just doesn't happen. Sorry. So, and now we are going to look closely as he's extradited to New York, and the New York police and law are going to take care of what they need to and file the charges. And he's probably going to get good representation because of his family and his ability to afford it. And it'll be very, very interesting. This legal case will be interesting because of all the complicating factors, the sympathy for what he did, his intelligence, and also what may have been a breaking point that he reached because of his excruciating pain. We don't know what painkillers he was on. There's a whole narrative yet to be written, and it'll be interesting.
What I do think will happen is he's going to have a really good lawyer, and this is probably going to be one of those, case of the decade that we'll be following as far as what happens to him.
Yeah, well, what makes these cases so big is because of, we collectively are more interested when wealth is involved in anything. You look at the Menendez brothers, you look at O.J. Simpson, you look at a case like this. So there's going to be, even though we didn't know who he was, there are going to be people that watch that case. Also, we've been born witness to this from the very beginning. There was video of him shooting this person. There are these surveillance photos that captured him and led to his capture. So we're already invested in this thing, and combined with that, you have these sympathies for what he did, that you had with the Menendez brothers in California, right? Their parents abused them allegedly. Now it seems more concrete that was the case, which is why they're revisiting the sentencing. With O.J. Simpson, you had people who just thought that, it was great to see a black man get away with murder rather than being tagged with murder that he didn't commit or wasn't anywhere near. And it did pit black versus white for a while. So there was that mitigating factor. There's so much that makes this case fascinating, and not the least of which is it could lead to some kind of positive change in this country.
Can we switch gears for a moment and talk about Trump's nominees to all of these positions? I was reading a story about Tulsi Gabbard and how the other nominees are so bad that she's escaped real scrutiny until now. And now she's they're really looking at her, and people are looking at her past, especially talking about her meeting with Bashar al-Assad of Syria, now that he's been deposed, and where her allegiances really lie.
Well, there were a lot of people that say that, Matt Gaetz was a red herring, so there was someone they could vote against, and then they would confirm all of the others. But then people kept looking at the others and seeing flaws. We see many more flaws in this crop of appointees and nominees than we do historically see, because many of them are out of the blue. They're not necessarily qualified at all for the jobs that they have. I mean, you had Ben Carson, you'll remember, in the first brain surgeon, an accomplished brain surgeon, was the head of housing and urban development, right? You had Rex Tillerson, who was a petroleum magnate and the CEO of, I believe it was ExxonMobil, who became Secretary of State. These were not typical qualifications. And now you have so many of these controversial, Pete Hegseth at Defense, for example, who it was looking bad for. And then Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, who said that she didn't see herself being able to vote for Pete Hegseth. All of a sudden, the Trump people say there's going to be retribution on you if you don't support him. All of a sudden, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to vote for him. And so you see the strong arm of the administration, which is not exclusive to the incoming Trump administration. You see the strong arm of the administration coming down and saying, you better do this or else there's going to be hell to pay. And I don't know why they would go to bat for someone like Hegseth, but they would presumably be doing it for others. And, the other side of that is that you have Tulsi Gabbard, who you just brought up, Kim. The Assad thing, I think, is going to be mitigated by the fact that so many people did meet with Assad for over many years, but she wasn't in a position to meet with Assad. She was not a member of official government. She was not somebody who was forced into meeting with him. She was a congresswoman at a time, and she'd been elected from Hawaii, but you'll see Nancy Pelosi, you'll see John Kerry, who was Secretary of State, who was a senator, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, people who would have reason to meet with Assad as we've seen. But I think that will mitigate the anger over that. But I think there's some people that just don't see Gabbard as qualified and see her as a little bit unhinged. Even Republicans who I spoke to during the 2016 election when she was running for president. So I'm not so sure that she's going to sail, but it's not unusual to see these people confirmed, and that's what's as disconcerting here. And Hegseth and Gabbard and Kash Patel are, I would say, the three stars of the will they be confirmed, they ought not to be department.
Well, one of the things I was reading on Politico, this comes from Politico, is that her kind of support, it could be seen as, of dictators, is kind of Trump's playbook anyway, so that they're very politically aligned in that way.
She's his nominee. I mean, there's a reason for it, and that could be it. And he loves somebody who was a Democrat and went away from the Democrats. Jeff Van Drew, a congressman from New Jersey, same thing. These are people that Trump has embraced over time, and he loves that. I mean, he's all about retribution and vengeance and owning the libs and gotcha, and he does it in a very childish and unproductive way, but it's been effective for him. And so it's also effective for the people that do that, the people like Tulsi Gabbard, who left the Democratic Party and is now a nominee for Donald Trump and is loving this attention, not to mention. So it's
you mentioned Pete Hegseth, and there's all kinds of articles about who's supporting him, who's not supporting him, and one of the bigger folks that has been a question mark on this whole thing is Joni Ernst, who's a senator, and she was saying, she is a victim of sexual assault. She doesn't know if she can get behind his nomination, and she's met with him twice, and now she says, well, I think I'm going to support him through this nomination process. But we know from this article on CNN yesterday that the MAGA crowd is coming after her, saying that she's going to be.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about. Yeah. That's who I was just talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, she's totally going to be primaried. And so now, even though she may not want to vote for him or see him confirmed, this is massive pressure on her to lose her job or, go along to get along.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
So it's in that case specifically, and so that's just it's a question of rewarding loyalty and how big a stick the administration carries, and anyone does. He's look, I think Joni Ernst also supported Brett Kavanaugh when he was nominated to the Supreme Court, and she brought up the same concerns then, but didn't go anywhere with them. And it's all about trying to toe the party line, and they are a very this administration is particularly hurtful to those who wrong them, and you saw that in only two out of the 10 people who voted to impeach Donald Trump from the Republican side still have jobs in Congress, and one of them in Washington, Newhouse, barely won and had to push aside a primary. So they practice what they preach, but there's some who are braver and stand up to it, and it's not going to be, in this case, Joni Ernst, because the people that have done it are mostly out of a job.
You listed a series of candidates. I think you said Hegseth, Gabbard, Gaetz. But do you think the RFK Jr. nomination is going to be a shoo-in? I was reading this story from multiple sources about how Nobel laureates are standing up and saying, these are people that are scientists that don't normally comment on politics, are standing up and saying, no, this is bad for science. 77 laureates in chemistry, economics, medicine, physics cite Kennedy's opposition to vaccines, his criticism of fluoridation in drinking water, his promotion of the AIDS conspiracy theories, his criticism of HHS agencies like the FDA, the CDC, the Institute for National Health. They're saying this is really, really bad. And I don't know if anyone's going to listen to the scientists anymore.
Yeah, well, I think that I don't know if people listen to scientists anymore, and I don't know if there is a reason to be optimistic that they will, and certainly in the next 4 years. But it's not just about that. It's not just about scientists. It's about people who we perceive historically as elite, right? As people who we've been accustomed to over a very long period of time, rewarding for their wisdom. We don't do that anymore. But I do think that there are going to be political realities that stand in the way of Kennedy's confirmation. I'm not saying that he won't be confirmed, but for example, one thing, he wants to do away with high fructose corn syrup, right? He wants to get rid of that. He thinks that's bad for people. Well, he may be right. He may be right about that, but we go back to Iowa and Joni Ernst's state, right, where they grow a lot of corn and they make a lot of corn syrup. Those are the types of sort of commerce issues that are going to stand in the way. And when commerce comes into play on the Republican side, it always wreaks havoc. So if Bobby Kennedy is going to be pushing as HHS secretary anything that's going to mess with the corn industry, I mean, sorry, that's not going to fly with a lot of these senators from corn producing states. Nebraska has 2 Republicans. Iowa has 2 Republicans. Minnesota has has 2 Democrats. And you go down into Indiana with 2 Republicans. You look at all these states where there's so much corn production, and that's what you find. It's going to be that's going to be a big challenge for him because corn is one of those political issues that nobody thinks anybody pays attention to. In those states, they do. Look at ethanol mandates. Those ethanol mandates are there because of the corn industry and because Republicans are even though they support the petroleum producing states, they're also forced in Iowa caucuses to say that we are going to protect corn. It's a real political chip that those corn producing states are able to play, and big ag is a big part of the Republicans. So
that's really interesting how we could have one candidate have a moral issue in Hegseth and the other one, RFK Jr., I would say moral as well, but you're talking about it being more of a financial issue and how the financial issue might actually be the one that rises to the top and prevents a nomination.
Well, for some Republican senators, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's not, he's not, if Kennedy is the problems he has are, you've listed several of them. There are more than just that, but this is kind of the sleeper problem he has, if you will. And it could be the one that impacts the votes of certain senators. It's certainly going to be asked at his confirmation hearing and going to be asked pretty loudly. We should, because we have a Pulitzer Prize winner in our midst, the great, as a guest host here, I've interviewed David both as a journalist, as an anchor when I was at Current TV, and also have read, as we all have, so much of what he has written. But I did not know until guest hosting the Mark Thompson show that he is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the professor of Trumpology. Is that
he might be the dean of Trumpology?
The dean,
yeah.
at least he's beyond professorship. I don't know if that's where that fits in on his resume, but I know a lot of the great things about David Cay Johnston. I'm very happy to be with him today. David, thanks for being on the Mark Thompson show. Thanks for coming to class when there's a substitute teacher too. So.
Well, thank you. The dean of Trumpologists, somebody, maybe it was Mark, bestowed on me. No, my title at Rochester Institute of Technology is Professor of Practice. And I think of myself as an academic utility infielder because I'm teaching journalism, law, including criminal law or criminology, and public policy. So that means a number of different places, just like if you're a utility infielder in baseball.
It's a heavy lift. Well, let's get, I want to get your input. We were just talking about, I don't know if you were here when we were.
Yes.
Talking about these Trump nominees and kind of the zeitgeist of what happens around the nomination process. We've witnessed it before. It varies from time to time, but it's pretty much a straight line until we got into the first Donald Trump term, and then I think he was one of the. If I'm not mistaken, Stephen Mnuchin may have been the only person who was there from day one till the last day. I think even Elaine Chao left after January 6th. Which is unusual. I mean, there's always departures, but to have this level of stick-to-itiveness, I guess, or lack of, was shocking. And now we see this whole crop coming in. What do you? When I say the zeitgeist, the think about it was that this is not really. He's going to have problems with some of these people, and he put some people in there because he knew he'd have problems, but it would allow others to skate through. And to me, Kash Patel is the one that he cares most about. What do you think from what you see thus far?
Well, I think first of all, this shows Donald's utter disregard for norms of behavior, for our Constitution, for competency. Donald used to say, I haven't heard him say it in quite a while, only hire the best people, only the best people. Yeah. And then, of course, once he gets rid of you, no matter who you are, why, you're just awful. So, of course, if you only get the best people, why did you appoint them in the first place?
Right.
The appointment of Tulsi Gabbard is particularly disturbing because as Director of National Intelligence, she will have access to any secret we have. And I don't think it is unreasonable to say you cannot trust her with any national security secret, given her past behavior. And the one thing I can assure you will be the case is that our allies, particularly the 4 other members of the 5 Eyes, U.S., Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, are going to be very careful about sharing material with us because she is so untrustworthy.
And you say that in a way that she, I mean, I'm sort of, I would say, lampooning it a little, but that there's a mole quality to it, that you're just uncertain with whom she would be sharing things because of her relationships with.
Yeah, well, just as we know that Donald shared very deep secrets, national security secrets involving sources and methods in May of 2017, in an unannounced Oval Office meeting with Foreign Minister Lavrov and Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Who knows what she will say, what she will share, what she will tell other people, and what her motives will be, given some of her behavior. Your discussion with Kim, I thought, was very on that when you see someone like Jody Ernst, who has no fundamental core principles that have ever been clear, she will say what sounds like a good thing, and then she'll go along with the party, particularly because she is subject to being primaried by somebody else. And that's how Donald's going to enforce it. Unless you have the courage to risk your position like Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, who had to run as an independent to keep her seat.
And won as a write-in
And one with that write-in, you're going to bow to Donald. And, more than 1 million people have died for this country. If you're not willing to risk your political office for this country, you shouldn't hold office. You're unfit if you're that much of a coward. And that's what Donald depends on. He depends on people being afraid and cowering. And so he may get these unfit nominees through. Hegseth, who has no qualifications of any consequence, being a former combatant doesn't make you qualified to be Secretary of Defense. He may get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. through, despite his just ridiculous, crazy beliefs that I don't know how else to describe them. They're just crazy. Kash Patel, I agree with you, is the most important person he wants in there. He is furious at the FBI. And of course, Donald believes that he should never be questioned. 8 years ago, during the New York State primary for president, he was asked by a radio host named Bob Lonsberry, well, as a Christian, Mr. Trump, when was the last time you asked God for forgiveness? And there's this pause, and Trump goes, ask God for forgiveness? I've never asked God for forgiveness. Why would I do that? I've never done a single thing in my life requiring asking for forgiveness. You don't need to know any more than that than to understand that Donald lives in this fictional world in his head where he creates his own reality. And of course he never did anything wrong because his reality is entirely internally driven. It has nothing to do with the objective, observable outside world.
Yeah. And if God thought that, and if Trump thought that God was the arbiter of forgiveness and thought he should be forgiven, Trump would primary God. So there's
exactly, yes. Trump would have no trouble saying, God, you owe me some contrition.
Yeah, and I say that only slightly facetiously. And I do think, look, the norms, we talk about the norms of politics, they've all been thrown out the window. And I learned in covering, I guess 3 of his elections now, that what he does, and by saying that, by sort of say, screw the norms, that has massive appeal to a lot of people, and I understand that as well. But when he gets there and the way he operates and with the vindictiveness, it's Nixon on steroids in a way. I also think we overhype generally the power of a cabinet secretary, right? If you are the Secretary of Health and Human Services, you cannot by fiat change the laws in America. But you're certainly going to have a lot of the backing of this president who is not going to listen to what the Congress has to say about it. Because what's that?
Yeah, Michael, you can still do an enormous amount of damage. During the first Trump
I'm not underscoring that. Go ahead.
Yeah. During the first Trump administration, I think it was Zinke, Trump's Interior Secretary, ordered the people in the Clean Water Act enforcement area to write very lengthy, detailed, hundreds of pages, detailed critiques of weaknesses in the law from court decisions of the statute, and where they were most vulnerable were someone to challenge any Clean Water Act, which means the polluters. After this report was written and done, because bureaucrats by their nature do what they're told to do, it disappeared. There's no record of it in the archives. And you know what? I'm very confident that polluters or lawyers for polluters have copies of this document so that they can block enforcement of the law. And Robert F. Kennedy, for example, as our chief health minister, he can do enormous damage. We announced, 3 decades ago, smallpox is over. Smallpox could come back, and it's killed probably more people than any other pathogen in world history. He thinks that vaccines are actually harmful. Well, some children who get measles, like when I did as a child, you get little red bumps and life goes on. But other people go blind, they die, they're left with lifelong maladies when a vaccine would take care of that. But if you believe vaccines cause harm, as Robert F. Kennedy says, then he's going to push very hard to stop that. The Probably the one place they're not going to have as much success as they want is with the military officer corps, because one of the great foundations of our democracy is that while sailors and soldiers take an oath to follow the orders of the president and defend the Constitution, officers only take an oath to the Constitution. And a lot of officers are going to stand up one way or another to improper orders. And you're going to see some of them fired, unjustly and wrongly fired. You're going to see an effort to court-martial some of them. You know, Trump wants to recall Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Once you become a military officer until age 70, you're subject to recall, and Milley's in his 60s. They're going to go after some people hoping that they will bend. I suspect with our very professional officer corps, they're going to have less success there. At the Justice Department, you know, there are a lot of lawyers who, like everybody else, they've got a mortgage and kids and college tuition, maybe if they're older, and a fair number of them are going to, in one way or another, knuckle under because of the practical realities of their economic lives. And one hopes that there'll be a refusal to follow unconstitutional orders. You know, indict Michael Schur because of the things he did, even though you didn't do anything criminal. One hopes that the prosecutors will say no, but
yeah, I agree. But it's all about hope, right? It's hope that people do the right things to make sure that they're able to lessen the impact of these nominees. And that's a terrible place to be, because you're going to be let down in certain places. And the reason, you know, I agree with you, David, about, you know, the impacts of an HHS secretary, for example, in reacting to what could happen down the road. I just think that, and the example you gave sort of bolsters that, is that, you know, when it comes to money, it's on the Republican side, and you know, and a lot of places on the Democratic side. When it comes to money, that's where the buck literally stops. So if in fact it's going to put these healthcare providers and researchers like Pfizer and Eli Lilly in financial trouble, it's going to be outlawing vaccines, for example, is not going to be a road down which they need to go. And that's the problem in America right now when you're nominating someone to an important position from the other party, is that appeasing the people within your own party becomes increasingly difficult.
Yes, and the Republicans are not unified. You know, there used to be the old Will Rogers joke about I don't belong to any organized group, I'm a Democrat, or words to that effect.
Right.
And the Democrats the Republicans with their very tiny majority in the House are going to need the Democrats for some legislation, but administratively, an enormous amount of damage can be done. Not approving grants for medical research, stopping research projects at a point where you've effectively undone all the investment you've already made. That will be harmful. And one of the things that will happen from this, and some of this we saw during the Reagan and the George W. Bush administrations, is some medical research left the country and went to India and China because they didn't have these ideological rules that we had. And what a strange thought that someone would leave the U.S. for China because we're the ones with ideology interfering with science, a very Stalinist sort of way to approach things. And if those things result in a very important new developments in pharmacology or genetics, the fortunes from that will flow to those countries, not to the United States. So there's serious economic issues that are here. On a related issue to this, Michael, there's a very interesting article last week from students at the Medill Journalism School at Northwestern, just north of Chicago, in the suburbs above Chicago, and who are led by Paul Farhi, a longtime superb business reporter at the Washington Post, probably the only really great business reporter they had. And it found that in counties in America with no newspaper, and there are about 3,300 counties or county-like locations, Trump won by 80 or 90% plus in the voting. And I think that tells you the Washington Post's motto, democracy dies in darkness, is spot on correct. Trump is doing best among people who don't know facts and don't have particularly strong critical thinking skills about politics and policy. Doesn't mean they don't have those skills, but they tend to be applied to things more like, the rules in a baseball or football play that's controversial, not politics. And that should be very, very disturbing to all of us because we're on the cusp of seeing the death of newspapers. A few days ago, my wife and I went 85 miles east to Syracuse, where I used to teach in the law school at the university, to see an art exhibit called Tim Atzif Final Edition. Tim Atzif was an artist and cartoonist who rose to become managing editor of the Newhouse-owned Syracuse daily newspaper before he retired. And it's in a room that's, 2/3 of an acre in size. It's numerous exhibits that he put together in about 8 or 9 months. And it's absolutely brilliant. It should be, somebody should put up the money who cares about this to have it in San Francisco and LA and Chicago and New York City and Boston and Washington especially, because it's just brilliant. And once we lose newspapers, which do the heavy lifting in journalism, a lot of what you hear on the radio or TV came out of the newspaper because they're the ones with the staff to do the work. My fear is that Americans will be even more vulnerable to demagogues and incompetents like Donald than they are now.
Right, 100%. I could not agree more, and it's a great point. And you can also look at it in the inverse, right? I mean, if you look at things that have happened, take the George Santos case, right? Had there been a local newspaper covering George Santos as he rose to be the candidate in that district, a weekly, a daily, whatever it was, they just didn't have the resources to cover politics. So
actually, in that case, there was a very small newspaper that raised the issues. The problem is its circulation was bupkis. People weren't reading it, and which is almost as bad as not having a news organization at all. But yeah, how does an absolute fabulous like George Santos get in? And look how much it took to get him out.
They also didn't have the resources to stay on that case. So they wrote one article is what I was going to say. And then it goes away. It evaporates because they don't have the resources and they don't have the circulation and they don't have the advertising dollars, which means they can't have the circulation. And look, we're not naive. It's a changing time, right? I mean, people are reading the New York Times on their phones and tablets if they're reading it at all, or they're getting it, in a digested in a different way through social media. But we earlier, Kim and I were having a conversation about the way that people get information. All these Trump voters who I speak to don't get it from Fox. They don't get it from, some of them get it from Newsmax, but they watch OAN or they get it from their own places and they know it's right. And those places don't have editors. They don't have they don't have departments of ethics. There's nothing that, and it's not that the others are flawless. It's that the others are at least trying to do everything they can to make sure that they don't have flaws.
The great investigative reporter Cy Hirsch, who was at the New York Times for about 7 years, Cy once said something I thought was spot on. He says, you pick up the front page of the New York Times, you can read the greatest journalism human beings have ever produced. Move over one column, pure crap. And that's the nature of the business. I mean, there's very good work and then there's stuff that isn't so good.
Well, you mentioned Farhi and Hirsch, and I will interrupt you there to just say both of them wrote books that I read. One, Farhi's, I think, was called Covering Politics in the Age of Trump, something like that, which was so helpful to me. And Cy Hirsch wrote a memoir called The Reporter, which was just fantastic.
Yeah. I've only read Cy's book, but Farhi, is that how you say Farhi, whom I've read for years?
I always say Farhi, but I don't know.
He was on my list of, there's a byline, you should at least read the beginning of the story to see if you have some interest, because you knew he was really good, as opposed to some journalists where I got, don't waste your time. It's unlikely you need to read it. But Trump is going to make a full-throated assault on news. He signaled that clearly. He's going to try to sue the New York Times out of business. You're going to see reporters being subpoenaed and judges being asked to hold them in jail. one of the things I teach my students to make sure they clearly understand is that habeas corpus, the right to your phone call if you're arrested by the police, your right to see your lawyer, that is not a right under the American Constitution. It says right in the Fifth Amendment, the privilege of habeas corpus. And it goes on to say, will not be suspended except in times of, I think it's insurrection or invasion or something. Habeas corpus was suspended by Abraham Lincoln, the worst thing he probably did. Trump, I don't be surprised if he suspends it so that he can grab up people and hold them, and they don't even have a right to a hearing before a judge. But he won't be troubled that people know that these folks are locked up so long as judges back him up. Remember, he's repeatedly said he will declare a national emergency over the people who are in the country either without permission or minimal permission. And Trump has almost said himself directly, little caveat in it, but his deportation people, the Minister of Hate, Steve, just name one on my mind.
Bannon. Bannon?
No, the other Steve, the young guy with looks like, who worked in the White House.
Stephen Miller.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And Tom Homan, who's going to be operationally in charge.
Yeah.
They have both said they're going to deport American citizens who are minors. So we have a lot of people in this country who they came and they're here illegally, but they have children who were born here.
Yeah.
And Trump says by executive order he's going to get rid of birthright citizenship. Well, I'm sorry, it's in the 14th Amendment. You can't get rid of that. But that doesn't mean they won't illegally and even in violation of court orders round people up and deport entire families, even though the children are American citizens.
Just Sunday, in speaking to Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, the president-elect said exactly what you're saying. He said, Welker asked, would he be deporting people? And he said, we have to. And he said, what about families that some of them are American citizens, some of them aren't? He said, I hate to break up families. I never want to break up families, but we'll have to, we'll have to send them all back to the original country.
So that's why I hedged a little about how the question was worded and the answer was given. I think he clearly intends to deport American citizens, and it's absolutely illegal to do that.
Right.
But we unfortunately have these court rules in our federal system that allow you to pick your judge. You're not supposed to pick your judge. Donald learned about the value of this when his very, very close business partner, the personal pilot of his helicopter, was arrested and confessed to being one of the biggest drug dealers in American history, a major international trafficker, a drug kingpin. And somehow Donald got his case transferred from Cincinnati, Ohio, to Newark, New Jersey, where it was turned over to a newly appointed federal judge named Marianne Trump Berry, his older sister. Now, she got rid of that case after a while, but it was after she went to the chief judge and told him, and I'm creating the language here, but she told him in effect, well, I fly in this man's helicopters all the time. He's personally piloted me many times. My husband rides in his helicopters every week because he's a lawyer for Donald's casinos, and he goes back and forth to Atlantic City several times a week. Donald learned a lesson in that, and that is you find the right federal judge who will do whatever you want, and you'll get what you want. Yeah. And by the way, in that case, the mules who drove the drugs from Miami to Ohio, they each got 20 years just for driving drugs in a car or a truck. The kingpin, Donald's buddy, served 18 months.
It's incredible. It's incredible, but it's also credible in the age of Trump. So it's that's what makes it so astonishing. And I think at the end, the most destructive thing, and I hope this is it, in Trump's legacy, will be the words fake news. And I think that has taken such a toll on our country, not just because it's a business I work in, but because of what the ripple effects of that have been. And I think it's going to take a very long time to come back from. And that's a big tragedy.
You know, Michael, I do a lot of overseas television these days. I'm not much anymore on CNN or MSNBC, but on the overseas shows, I'm often matched with someone who is one of Trump's surrogates.
Yeah.
And I've literally had one of them say, well, you know, your other guest, you understand, just a paid liar. And I broke in and I said, I'm sorry, who's paying me? Well, you know, whoever it is that's paying you. And I said, I work for myself. I'm paid by people who buy my books, and my salary is a professor. So nobody is paying me, and you know, but the you know, the effort to discredit anything that's honest journalism is a fundamental tenet of being a dictator. That you must discredit anything that is threatening to you, as the physicist Solzhenitsyn said when the Soviet Empire was coming to an end. You know, they, meaning the Kremlin, they know we're lying. We know they know we're lying. They know we know they know that we're lying. And Donald has been very successful in persuading people that anything that's said that's critical of him is not true. And once you get people into that cult-like mindset, now it's really difficult to break through with any set of facts. So Donald right now is saying, as he told Kristen Welker on Sunday, we had the greatest economy in American history when I was president. No, we didn't. We had the greatest economy in American history when Joe Biden was president. Joe Biden was creating jobs at the rate of 500,000 a month on average. Trump didn't even hit 200,000. In fact, Trump underperformed before the pandemic Barack Obama once the Great Recession ended. So just as you can remove the pandemic, I think you do the same thing. You remove the Great Recession because it wasn't caused by Obama. And when you compare them, Obama created 3% more jobs on average every month than Trump, and then Biden comes along and more than doubles, a record no one's ever seen. And this continued after we got back to the number of jobs following the pandemic. It isn't just filling in the missing jobs. And by the way, there's no guarantee that would have happened. Many countries in the world are still suffering. You know, our economy is the strongest in the world because Bidenomics actually worked because it wasn't focused on giving more money to billionaires through tax reductions. It was focused on investing in the things that create jobs and that make for a broadly prosperous society. It just takes time for things like that for people to see, oh, yeah, that's a lot better. And after being down for year after year after year, to expect people in 3 years to see things have turned around, you know, that's unless you really understand data, you're not going to understand that. It takes a while for your pocket to feel better.
Yeah, very true. And not to mention, and I'm going to get to a question for you in a moment, but yeah. I think one thing that we look at candidates, we look at the Democratic Party, we look at people who say, oh, they're too weak on this or too weak. The weakest thing that they're weakest on is messaging, clearly, because everything you just said in 91 seconds was exactly what the Democrats should have to, and that might be because Trump has taken the knees out of how we typically message in this country. And to his credit, because as I said earlier in the show, he's gotten elected 2 out of 3 times he's run for president, the messages that you just said are not reaching the people they need to reach, or that he's created such a skepticism about the messengers that they may never.
Well, and a good example of how he's distorted things was on another show, and person was railing about the price of eggs right now. And I said, well, do you know that egg prices actually adjusted for inflation went below when Trump left under Biden? No, I didn't hear that. I said, well, they did. I'll be glad to send you the data. But he said, eggs right now are very expensive. I said, yes, because we had to kill 100 million laying hens because of avian flu. And avian flu is spreading because we have these industrial chicken operations. They're not farms, they're industrial operations. And the guy basically came back and said, well, that's Biden's fault. And he said, furthermore, they didn't kill that many chickens. And I said, I'm sorry, we had 384 million chickens. We killed 100 million. That's more than 25%. You remove 25% of laying hens from the market, egg prices are going to go up. And no, it's not Biden's fault. And this guy came back and said, well, I don't care what facts you throw at me. I'm not going to believe any of that.
Right.
And that's what Donald's done. I don't care what the facts are. This is instilling in people what children do, what you and I and everybody else said when we were a child. We wish something was true, therefore it's true.
Right.
And Donald never grew out of that. And he's now gotten other people to embrace this, immature mental illness.
Yeah, that's the best way of putting it. I don't tax overtime here. I don't know if you can stay for 2 minutes.
Sure. What? Yeah, you had a question. I apologize.
Well, no, there's a question from someone from Peter Newton.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little older than the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation used to be more reasonable than it is right now. In I think it was 67, not long after Ralph Nader appeared on the cover of Time, and surveys showed was the most popular man in America with his consumer movement. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which represents not your neighborhood businesses like local chambers, it represents the big industries in this country, often against small business. They hired a brilliant lawyer in Richmond, Virginia, named Lewis Powell, to write them a memo on what do we do. Lewis Powell later became a Supreme Court justice. And Powell wrote something called the Powell Memo. If you just go to an internet search engine and put in the Powell Memo, it'll pop up right away. You should read it. The people listening and watching, please read it. Powell laid out, here's how we stop Ralph Nader and all the things around him. You have to bring the press to heel. You have to get rid of the unions. You have to do a whole series of other motions. And he said all of these are necessary so that America is run by business for business. Now, Powell's entitled to his view. I don't think the purpose of the country is that. You'll notice the Constitution doesn't say a word about riches and wealth. It's about freedom and liberty and protection of your rights. But if you read the memo, you should come away saying, wow, that is a very, very smart guy who wrote that memo. And hardly anybody knew about it at the time. It began sort of circulating, I think, in the late 90s. And if you read it and think about the fact that it's been almost 60 years, everything Lewis Powell said needed to be done to squelch democracy on behalf of business has pretty much been done.
It's amazing.
We can undo it. Don't, please don't lose heart, folks. Don't, I'm giving up. I don't care. Then you're just letting the other folks win. And, I trust me, I had no intention 9 years ago when Donald announced spending the last 9 years of my life doing this, nor now I know at least the next 4 years. I had plans and I put them aside because this is important. And it's important not just to us. It's important to everyone who comes after us, to people who aren't even a twinkle in their father's eye at this point.
Right. Yeah.
We need to protect our democracy. And this will play out. And we want it to play out in a way that we're a stronger, free people at the end of this than we were going into this.
Yeah, and that would be great. I mean, that's optimism that I can attach myself to. But man, I'd love to. I'd love to sort of stop my self-doubt about that optimism.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I stopped being publisher of DC Report because I just couldn't think about this 24/7 anymore.
Yeah.
And turned it over to friends of mine who've done a wonderful job. And I hope people consider supporting DC Report because we run it on a shoestring budget. I think our annual, we broke a lot of the biggest, most important Trump stories, and we did it on a budget of about $35,000 a year, $3,000 a month on average.
It's a great and remarkable thing. Yeah, I'm going to ask you two 20-second answers because people want from you on Syria. Donald Trump said these are two. Donald Trump said it's none of our business. That's the first 20-second answer. The second one is the question is Jolani and al-Bashir, who's now going to be running this government. They're promising that everybody's going to be happy and they have nothing against anyone. How much should we believe them? So one and two.
Well, on the first one, this is proof that Donald knows nothing about geopolitics.
Yeah.
The Russians made nice with the Syrians because they needed a warm water port without the Bosporus they had to pass through to come out of the Black Sea. They ran at the end of the day. What happens in Syria will affect Israel, which we're closely tied to, and the whole of the Middle East. So it matters. Even though there's only 20-some million people in Syria, like all the rest of the world, it's important to our national security. And secondly, it is heartening to see a leader come in and say, we're going to have complete freedom of religion. We're not going to restrict women based on their gender. I don't know if it'll last or not. I don't think any of us know. It may. It certainly is a way to suddenly build support. Bashar al-Assad lost because he only had the support of this narrow group of oligarchs around him in Damascus. He bombed his own people. He had Russians with jets strafe his own people. He didn't build, as most dictators try to do, centers of support all over the place. Right. People beholden to him. That's what Donald's going to be doing, building people whose welfare and safety depends on loyalty to him, but all over the country. And we'll see how this plays out, but I think it's too early to say, nah, it's going to end up being the kind of mess we see in other Middle East countries that have overthrown their governments.
I agree, and it's based on the jubilation that I've seen from pictures over there and people saying, and that's I don't know that I would have picked someone to lead the government whose name was al-Bashir, but that has nothing to do with anything. David Cay Johnston, it's been a long time, and it's been a pleasure doing this again with you. And thanks for coming on. Like I said, not everybody shows up to class when the substitute teacher is in, but I'm glad you joined me, and I'm smarter for the conversation. I know everyone watching is.
Thanks.
As well.
Take care, Michael.
Take care,
Kim. Bye-bye.
All right, so how about that? David Cay Johnston bringing it as he always does. It's always a pleasure, man. He like I said to everybody, he just makes you smarter talking to him, and he gives you perspective on how you should look at things. And for me, I admire his stick-to-itiveness on this, because I'm exhausted by it and I'm defeated by it a little bit. And you spend a few minutes with David and you see that you just have to keep forging on, and that it's important, but of course it's understandable why it's difficult to do so.
It's very difficult, but you know what it is, Michael Schur? It's Tech Tuesday on the Mark Thompson Show.
It is Tech Tuesday. And because of that, I think that we ought to. I don't know what to do on Tech Tuesday. I mean, I guess we could bring Jefferson Graham in.
We've got the expert. We've got the Tech Tuesday expert, Jefferson Graham, former USA Today tech writer, now host of Photo Walks TV here on YouTube. Hi.
Mark, you look so different. What happened?
I look better today, I have to say. I don't know what it is. It's been for 2 days. I've looked so good, and I ordinarily don't. Jefferson, thanks for coming in when Mark's not here. I appreciate it. You are speaking to perhaps the least tech-savvy person in his generation, and that even gives me a little bit of a grade on a curve because I put my generation into it. So I love hearing and being part of this conversation. Anyone who knows me would laugh that I would be doing a tech segment.
Okay, well, I'm doing dollars and cents today, so it's not very technical. I think you'll be fine with it.
All right, good. So tell me what's up, Jefferson. Tell me.
There are a whole bunch of holiday aggressive ads for get a free phone on us from Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T that you can just walk into the store and get a phone worth $1,000 for nothing. Right. And my brother was so excited, and hopefully he's not watching this right now, but he believes he got a free phone. He really does. Yeah. He didn't.
Tell me why he didn't.
These companies generate millions of dollars in profits every quarter, right? Do you think they generate them by giving away giving you $1,000 or more? And no, they don't. What they do is
it's a free room at the casino, right?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a free room at a casino. There's no such thing as a free phone. There is not any. It just isn't. It's not there. So what they do is, first of all, they give you a phone that you don't want. They give you the entry-level phone with no storage on it, and so you start there, and then they say, the contract that you have now or that you would want to get, which is the lowest price one, you don't qualify for that. You have to spend more money.
Right.
So you have to get a more expensive contract. Then that contract, which might be 2 years long, is now 3 years long, and on it goes. So I had fun calling. I went into the Verizon store. I called T-Mobile. I called AT&T. I sat there going through all the motions with them. My monthly bill for T-Mobile is $80. I'm on the senior plan. Thank you very much. And they were able to whack it up to $150 if I got the free phone.
It's amazing, right? That's crazy. And were they the most egregious, or was it across the board? Is there
Verizon is the most egregious.
Yeah.
Yeah, Verizon is the most expensive. When I switched from Verizon to T-Mobile, I was at $240 a month, and I went down to $80. What does that tell you?
And do you notice? So the fear that a lot of people have locked in, I think, is at the genesis of cell phone technology. There were some people that had a bigger map and better service, and calls would drop, and that doesn't seem to happen as much anymore. Do you notice anything different since you made the change whatsoever?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, I have calls that drop. I could tell you, I know exactly where they will be. I know what street they're on. Right. But so what?
Yeah.
So what?
Right. Thank God sometimes.
Yeah. Do I want to spend $240 a month and be able to call my mother on that block, or can I wait?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And so there is still a little bit of inconsistency between carriers, but not enough to warrant.
I think that for all of them, there's specific streets and neighborhoods that one may be better than another. But and there's no way of really knowing until you take the phone home. They do now let you hold on to it for 2 weeks and then return it, which they didn't used to. Right. They didn't used to let you do that. But I did not like spending what are we talking, $2,800 a year on cell phone service versus $900. Right. I didn't like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's enough of a savings where you can suffer on a block as long as it isn't your own block, right? There's certain places where it has to work all the time.
But I will say that AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile found a way to go from there to there. It definitely, it was double. It was double for the free phone. Free phone.
Incredible. So, take that to heart, all of you who think that you're getting a deal. As Jefferson said, there's no. These companies are multi-billion-dollar companies, and they're not giving away things that are too good to be true. And the casino analogy is really true. We have one of the viewers asking Mr. Graham, I'm looking for a decent drone that isn't too expensive. Any recommendations?
Yeah, the DJI. Well, first of all, the DJI Neo. It's a brand new one. It's $200, and it flies automatically. So that would be a fantastic drone for you to get. I would rather spend a few extra $100 and get the Mini 3, which I think you can get for $399. The Neo is fun, and yes, it flies automatically, but it doesn't go very high. And so I actually returned it because I prefer a drone that goes higher in the sky and that I can actually manipulate. But either one of them would be really good. I have the Mini 4, which is now selling for about $1,000. But the reason it's selling for $1,000, it comes with extra batteries, and that's very important because the battery, they'll tell you will last for 30 minutes. The truth is it'll last for 15 if you're lucky. And if you're out on a shoot, you're going to want more than one battery. You're just going to have it.
Great. And I'm
right, Michael, I know you're into drones. I know that you're a big flyer.
Yeah, Jeff Mills, my photographer for many years on the road, tried to teach me all about the drones, and in this great Australian accent finally said, you know what, Schulze, let's just leave it at this. You're never going to learn. So I was like, all right. Yeah. So he knew me pretty well. I want to ask, and this is not something we've prepared or said we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Stuff that you've seen at the holiday, like, going into Christmas, not even last minute gifts, because that sounds too local newsy. But is there something really cool that you've seen that is somewhat affordable and kind of novel and fun that people might.
Well, that self-flying drone was the thing that I selected as what I thought the hot gift. That's the hot gift that parents can afford $200 to give their kid, and the kid can have a lot of fun with it. That would be the most affordable. I'm not into gaming, so I know when you come into gift giving, you're talking a lot of gaming stuff. The Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which are $300, they're video glasses that are also sunglasses, and they can do all sorts of Siri-like things like set reminders and give you the directions. That's a really cool gift. $299. Most people don't know that you're recording them. I have used them in many situations, like if I wanted to get footage at a diner and not be awkward by holding the phone up at somebody, I just turn on the glasses, and it works pretty well. So, go ahead.
Can you look cool wearing them? I mean, is there Tom?
Oh, they're Ray-Bans. Do
you look like Tom Cruise in Risky Business? Do you look like Okay.
Because now everybody raise your hand if you've heard of Risky Business that's watching the show today, right?
That's what. Yeah, I think there are people here heard of Risky Business, but I mean Tom Cruise, or maybe not. Maybe I'm dating myself. I
think he wore them in Mission Impossible also.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. Mission Impossible 3 would make us even more current. So excellent. Well, Jefferson, thank you for stopping by, for educating us on this, and I will in fact tell that to someone I know who was looking to leave to get a phone, and who I was watching football with the other day, and said, I got to do this. It's time. I mean, I'm spending too much, and I want to get a free phone, and I'm going to. Apply that to Emilio and tell him what's wrong with it.
One deal I found that doesn't sound awful is Boost Mobile, which is owned by Dish Network. Yeah. And their deal is if you pay $1,000 for the phone, we'll give you a free year of service. Okay. Yeah. Now that is logical. You could understand the math. It doesn't cost them anything to give you the service. So okay. And that may be one way to go.
Yeah. All right. Good. By the way, some hands being raised in the comment section. I'm not the only person who's heard of Risky Business.
Okay. Very good. Very good. I'm glad to hear it.
All right.
And we'll slide across the floor. We're going to slide across the floor in our underwear.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Jefferson Graham, it's Photo Walks TV. It's a YouTube series. Check it out. Thanks for coming in while I'm here. And Mark will be back looking better than ever, I'm sure, next week.
All right, great to see you.
All right, you too. That was fun. I made it through a text segment, which I never thought I'd be able to do, and I sounded a little bit like I knew what I was asking other people's questions, and my own question was a softball, so I don't give myself any credit, Kim. Yeah, but again, now, would you ever buy a drone for your kid?
No,
absolutely
not.
Right, because
it depends on if they had some type of hobby where, we had an open space to fly it. If they were into aviation, maybe. Yeah. But my children don't really have that as a hobby. And I live in a neighborhood. So what are you going to do? Spy on people? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. Right. I mean, it's like it's giving it to the kid and saying, here, you're going to have this and do only nefarious things with it. Right.
Right.
And you'll probably break it. And you probably won't,
or crash into something with it, or hurt someone's property with it. Right. I see all kinds of problems with this. So that drones is not where I'm going.
No, I wouldn't go with drones either. I'm anti. I mean, I see why we have drones, but
those balls that are like they're glowing orbs that you can control with your hands as far as them going up and down.
Yeah. They almost look like magic tricky, right?
Yes, exactly. My son almost broke the dining room light with it last year. So, things that fly in our house, no bueno. No.
Yeah, we don't need that at all.
No, we don't need it.
Yes, but like when you're not a techie, you think that everybody else and all kids want tech stuff.
Right.
Not me at all. And so, I mean, my kid is beyond wanting tech stuff. He wants money. But truthfully, like that's the thing that I was never the person to do that. I'm glad that Jefferson's helped us along with that. We should do one more story, I think, before we get out of here. And there was one that you sent along about this passenger trying to divert the flight.
Oh, yeah. Before we get to it, let me just throw this in, because while we've been talking, there was a little bit of breaking news, I would say. It's not earth-shattering, but Senator Mitch McConnell fell on Capitol Hill. And he suffered a
figuratively or literally?
He fell, like literally fell, and scratched his face. So they had to send the medics that were seen entering McConnell's office. Other lawmakers say it was just to check out a very small scratch, that he's totally fine. But I did want to throw that out there because I know we didn't get to news. And because we didn't get to news, I just want to give a little love to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, our sponsor.
So you want to? Let's do news to kick us out of here. You want to do some news?
It might be a little late. It might be a little bit late for news, but I know I had a Heisman Trophy finalist story in there for you too. But it is CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. When you're looking at holiday gifts, speaking of gifts, the Coachella Valley tea is on my list. I have the winter solstice tea ready to slip into a couple of stockings. The holiday coffee, amazing. So check it out, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is all fresh grind, all really, really sourced well. You're going to love it. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And when you go there, make sure you get the Mark Thompson Show exclusive 10% off. It is Mark T, all together, Mark T at checkout. We'll save you some money there at the end. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Yeah.
And thank you for reminding me, not just to buy my coffee at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, but that we needed to do that because they are kind to us, we are kind to them, and we do the news. I don't ever think, that's just me, that it's too late to do the news, but I do. Yeah. But you don't feel like doing the news today. It sounds.
I'll do whatever you want me to do whenever you want me to do it.
Well, here, let's do this story. We don't have to end. We can end a couple of minutes late because we started a couple of minutes late. I liked this story about the passenger arrested after trying to divert the flight to the U.S. We talk about crossing the border illegally. A passenger aboard a Mexican airline flight to Tijuana on Sunday allegedly tried to divert the aircraft to the United States by use of force. And it was going from El Bajo to Tijuana, and it had to land in an emergency way in Guadalajara. And apparently, they haven't told us what kind of force it was that they tried to exert in order to get the plane there. But going back, there was a time when planes were hijacked all the time. Constantly, there were planes being hijacked, and that's exaggerating a little bit, but hijacking seemed to stop. And now this looks like a good old-fashioned hijacking where they're not trying to do any damage. They just want to get to the United States. And I wonder if in the crackdown on immigration that our future president wants to implement, if we're to be seeing more hijackings coming down the road. There's something nostalgic about a good old-fashioned hijacking.
Interesting about hijackings because since 9/11, with all of the security protocols that were implemented, now you can't get into the cockpit. The doors are secure. Everyone's looking for someone acting squirrely on the plane. I think this is the reason the good old-fashioned hijacking has gone out of fashion. But this guy was not taking that for an answer. He put a pen against her neck. That's scary.
Yeah, no, that's scary. A pen against the neck. Yeah, that is scary. But again, and I don't mean to demean the scariness for the flight attendant here, because it had to have been the scariest thing that ever happened in her life. You're right, Kim, because that used to happen in the cockpit. Knock down the door. Hey, we got a gun. Take us to wherever we want to go, and then it's done. And then, the hijacking's ended. Somebody might get arrested. There's usually once you get where you're going, the getaway is kind of tough in a hijacking. But
that's the problem. Yeah.
I read the story and thought, it's nice to see a good peaceful hijacking again, but I guess it wasn't so peaceful for the woman involved. Yeah, I'm cool with doing the news or not doing the news. I think one of the things you brought up, Mitch McConnell, he is no longer going to be the majority leader in the Senate. And what's interesting, if we want to push this forward politically, is the most likely person to run as a Democrat and do well for a Mitch McConnell seat, were he to leave voluntarily or otherwise, would be Andy Bashir, who is a Democratic governor in that state, which would. And he has won twice, and his father, Steve Bashir, won. It's a name that is very familiar in Kentucky, and he's somebody who could give a Republican in that state a run for their money. So to have a Democratic senator from Kentucky would certainly change the Senate. It wouldn't matter as much because it's not quite as close as people on the Democratic side had hoped. It's 53-47 going into the next Senate. But Bashir would be someone who could take that seat, and that would be a lot different. There are no Southern Democrats who serve in the U.S. Senate, and very few in the U.S. House, and so Kentucky having that would be an interesting turn. I'm glad that the majority leader seems to be okay, and we move on from there.
Yeah. He's going to be okay, but this isn't the first time he's had a health incident on Capitol Hill. So he's getting up there, and just because he won't be the leader anymore doesn't mean he's not stepping down from the Senate, right?
He's not. It's just that he's not going to be the majority leader. It's what's this? Somebody just wrote back, what is this end on time stuff? I'm sorry.
Speaking of which,
we're kind of, I don't want to disappoint here. I want to stay on. He also gave $5 in the super chat.
Thank you, Peter.
A good question to David Cay Johnston. I mean, I should waste a little bit more time and move on. Scott Rittenberg, same thing. You started on time yesterday, missed the whole show. Here's my contribution to the TMT $200 million producer guest bonus fund.
There you go.
That's a very good fund. It's slightly under what Mark's paying me to do this, but still, it's nice. It's a nice gesture. It's very Swiftian. Hey, Love, Shore, and Johnston must limit spending till know if my insurance accepts my appeal of their denial of my brief hospital admittance. Yeah, that's where you should. Don't worry about $5 to the show. Mark would say, "No, what are you talking about?" No, but be careful, because we know what's going on with insurance in this country. And thank you, Ellen Finkoff, for saying great interview. You and David had a nice rapport. Sometimes interviews are great by accident. It's usually because the person you're talking to is so good at what they do and what they know. But I love interviewing as part of my job. And Spencer Jaffe, he's still attractive. I'm gay, by the way. So Mark is.
I think we were talking about Matt Gaetz then.
Okay.
Remember whether Matt Gaetz was
we're going back. So Spencer gave $5 in the super chat. We appreciate that. I wasn't going over the top on Matt Gaetz, but like I said,
you kind of were a little bit.
I wasn't. I was saying he's a nice looking guy. And
very surprised.
If you spent as much time on Capitol Hill as I have, you would not say that about everybody. I promise you. That's not the case, and they're not there to look good. Thank you for the kind words, Ricky Aubert 1. Okay, no contendo. $5 to the super chat. You can rap about shooting people and get hit with a harder case than these wealthy old boys, i.e. YFN, Lucci, Sergio Kitchens, Jeffrey Williams justice system. Okay. I appreciate that. I don't understand it, and
I don't either.
but this person gave money and is passionate and took the time. So I'd love to understand, but I don't, and I can't understand about everything. Spencer was talking about Luigi. Okay, so Luigi being attractive. He's still attractive, not Matt Gaetz. So I don't have to make excuses. Luigi's still attractive. Yeah, a lot of people were saying he looked better in the surveillance pictures than he did in real life. Well, maybe it wasn't really him, and we'll find that out too.
There's video of Luigi being taken into court today, and he's yelling at the press who's gathered outside the courthouse or on the steps or whatever. And he looks like he's pretty agitated and pretty upset.
Yeah, it's all super curious to me. It's super curious that he was shaking. He seemed like a cool customer all the way through, and then I guess the reality of this is sinking in to him. And if he's had some kind of a mental break, which one would presume he had in some way, and now the reality of this is what's happening to the boy from the pretty high school and the fraternity and UPenn. It's going to take a toll on him, and it's going to be pretty scary. He does look angry in that picture, and this is fascinating, and it's a fascinating human interest story, and it's got an impact too. It's not just a killing with a sympathetic killer. This is speaking to a lot of people. So it's going to be interesting to continue watching this and see what happens to Luigi as things move along. But it's not going to be his best trip to New York. We'll put it that way.
No, it's not going to be the same trip as last time.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I get to hang out with you again, Michael Schor, and we have John Rothman on the show tomorrow.
Perfect. And we're going to try and get some other guests, and spoken to a couple of members of Congress. It's a busy week up there, but the 3 to 4 p.m. hour might be where we can get somebody. I have somebody who has a book podcast who may come and give us some holiday books later in the week. 5 good holiday books, and she runs a book podcast with interactive with authors and books. So that might make us a little smarter, keep us off our devices. Don't tell Jefferson Graham that we're having an actual book person and not a book tape person or a Kindle person. Anyway, thanks, Kim. Thank you, Tony. You guys have all been great. Thanks for participating in the comments. I read them when I can, and this is a lot of fun. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
I'm Shara Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
See you next at the After Party Live, everybody.
Bye.